Hi guys, Henry here from The Closer Look. In this week's video, we'll be analysing Batman vs Superman whilst asking the question, why did it fail as a movie? All materials used in this video are for a non-profit educational purpose and fall well within the guidelines of fair use. Now, before I start this video, I would just like to say I actually enjoyed this movie, but I completely understand why the vast majority of viewers do not share my opinion, as there are many flaws with this film. Also, two warnings I need to give you before we start. Firstly, spoilers for Batman vs Superman, and also I may geek out at some point because in my spare time, I'm a bit of a DC fanboy. Anyway, a fellow YouTuber who makes similar content to me called Nerdwriter made a video about this very topic a couple of months back. In this video, he made the conclusion that the movie failed because it kept focusing on individual moments rather than the overall story. He has a point, but I can safely say that he only scratched the surface. There is a lot more here that we need to address before we answer the question of why it failed. Also, Nerdwriter, if you're watching, I just gave you a shout out and sent at least 2, maybe even 3 of my viewers your way. So I'm just saying, maybe you could shout me out. Sorry, I'm just desperate for more exposure. Anyway, it is easy to get caught up in little moments and criticise the film purely on them. For example, the infamous Martha scene. However, in my first draft of this video, I tried to analyse some of these specific moments, but it never really answered the essay's question, and I just ended up right back where I started. So, in this video, I'll instead aim my focus on the overall picture of the film. So, reason number 1 for why this film failed. None of the characters had good motivation. We know Batman's motivation. He wanted to kill Superman to protect the innocence of his city. But throughout the story, what was Superman's motivation to stop Batman? And also, what was Lex Luthor's motivation? Pause the video now and ask yourself those questions. Have you thought about it? Okay, so what was Superman's motivation? If you have an answer, then you're clearly a better man than me because I've seen the film 3 times and I still have no bloody clue. You can tell Superman's motivation was extremely weak because the scriptwriter had to force in the idea that his mother's life was on the line, so he had to fight Batman instead. So, we've established that Superman's motivation was very weak, if even that. But now, let's look at Lex Luthor. What was his motivation? That's the ridiculous part. He genuinely has no motivation at all. He pits Superman and Batman against each other in a fight and puts millions of lives at risk for what I can only assume to be purely his own self-entertainment. This issue of motivation underlines one of the key flaws in this movie. It has no soul. Civil War came out 6 months before Batman vs Superman, and it has a somewhat similar storyline, so this makes it a natural control to test why BVS wasn't good. And the number 1 reason is this. We actually cared about the characters in Civil War. As an audience, we fully understood why everyone was doing what they were doing, and more than that, we felt genuine, real connection and emotion for both Iron Man and Captain America. All of this culminating in the soul-destroying final fight between them as 2 once close friends become worst enemies. The emotion and empathy we have as an audience is pouring through the screen in Civil War. But with Batman vs Superman, we felt none of that. There is no moment of sympathy or love or any emotion at all for that matter. When Superman was killed in the end, it was supposed to be the emotional climax of the film. In this moment, not only was I not sad in any way, I was actually bored. I even remember yawning in the cinema during his funeral scene. And not only does Superman's death carry no real weight at all, as we all know they'd never kill off Superman this early because he's too much of a cash cow, but Snyder has the audacity to make the sequence where everyone is mourning his death 10 minutes long. And throughout this sequence, Snyder is trying his absolute best to tell us to do one thing. Be sad. Be sad. Be sad. Are you sad yet? Snyder, as a director, is brilliant at creating good visuals, but what he's not so good at is being a good storyteller. He doesn't know how to build rapport between a character and his audience, and by an extension of that, he doesn't know how to make the audience care. Snyder knew he didn't create enough emotion in the film, so he made the morning sequence 10 minutes long to really force the sadness down the audience's throat. It's like my granddad used to say, you can polish that turd as much as you like, but at the end of the day, it's still a piece of shit. Now, let's move on to the second reason for why this film failed. The creators did not respect the source material. Batman has always had one rule. Never take a life, even when you're looking the devil in the eye. Never compromise, never back down. There is always another way. Batman never kills, and if the real Batman we all know were in the shoes of this movie's Batman, he would never condemn any man to death, even if that man had committed the most horrific crimes. This right here is one of Batman's most admirable traits. It essentially is what makes Batman, Batman. But in this film, they prostituted out the character of Batman, ignored his history, ignored what made him the iconic hero he is, and changed his character fundamentally, purely so they could have a 3-minute glorified punch-up. But the change to Batman's character isn't what annoyed me the most. What annoyed me the most was the unforgivable and truly pointless changes they made to Lex Luthor. I warned you at the start I might geek out. Well, here it comes. In the comics and animated shows, Lex Luthor has always been the best villain in DC's history, with the exception of maybe the Joker. Luthor is cunning. He is a genuine genius, and will ignore all ethical boundaries until his goals are met. When Luthor is in the room, he owns it. Every word that comes out of his mouth is meticulously planned, and he is a master manipulator. The reason why he is such a brilliant Superman villain is because even though he has no physical powers, he can always beat the Man of Steel purely on intellect alone.
Do you know how much power I'd have to give up to be president? That's right, conspiracy buff. I spent $75 million on a fake presidential campaign, all just to tick Superman off.
But instead of this dark, brooding, intimidating Luthor, we got this.
Next category, circles. Round and round and round they go to find Superman. Wrong category, boy. No, triangles. Yes, Euclid's triangle.
The reason I believe this change to be a bad move is a very simple one. If the animated version of Luthor were in this movie, it would have been better in every way. A lot of people complained about Luthor's lack of motivation, but here's another nail in the coffin for this film. If Snyder added a 50-second scene into the movie, it would have dramatically improved Luthor as a character. If I made Batman vs Superman, here's how I would have done it. Luthor is sitting in his chair, looking through his skyscraper's window straight down at the people of Metropolis. The senator bursts into the room with anger in her eyes. I'm blocking your import license. I won't be an accomplice to your manipulative schemes, the senator said, with a certain fear in her voice. The camera is focusing on just Luthor's mouth. At no point yet in the movie have we had a full view of Luthor's face. Luthor lets out a sly smile, still looking down through the window. You have a wonderful daughter, Senator Finch. Rachel is one of the highest achievers in her class. For her sake, you will let this bill pass, Lex said, with an uncomfortably friendly tone. The senator's eyes widened with fear. Luthor still not so much as turning his chair to acknowledge her presence. You're a monster, the senator said, with her body trembling as she did. No, I'm not the monster. Superman is. The world needs to be protected. I am the only one who can provide such protection, said Luthor with a great degree of confidence. Bullshit! This isn't about doing what's right. You don't care what happens to those people down there. This isn't about right and wrong. It's about you. You have such an ego that you can't stand the idea that someone out there has more power than you. Luthor slowly turns his chair to look the senator straight in the eye. The camera is on his lower face as he lets out a sinister, sly smile. Now, I hope we're all in agreement, but that version of Luthor right there would have been completely superior to Eisenberg's interpretation in every way. Now, Snyder didn't 100% balls his character up. There was one scene on the helipad where he calls Superman his real name, confessing he knows his secret identity. He also has pictures of his kidnapped, gagged mother that he throws at his feet. All of this in a manipulatory move to bend Superman to his will. This was the only moment in the entire film that actually evoked an emotional response from me, as not only did it fall into line with what the real Luthor would have done, but it was also a very unsuspected and enjoyable twist. Also, I need to ask you all a favour. Don't blame Jesse Eisenberg for messing this character up. Snyder and the others behind the scenes were the ones who made the decision to take this character in this direction. Jesse even says this in an interview.
Which I was so surprised by because I guess I pictured Lex Luthor as older, and I guess just by virtue of him being bald, I assumed I wouldn't... I never thought of myself as that kind of character, but then when I read the script and I got on set, I realized that I could do a good job with it.
Now, this leads me on to my final point. There is an element to storytelling that every good writer and director understands. However, it appears Zack Snyder has failed to grasp this idea as Batman vs Superman completely ignores the invisible rule of storytelling. The rule is this: show, don't tell. What this saying means is if you want to tell the audience a fact, show it to them organically and let the audience come to their own conclusions. Never tell the audience, show them. This is the reason most filmmakers boycott narration, because narration is telling the audience the story instead of letting the audience experience it for themselves. Okay, let me give you an example in another film. So I'm going to talk about Harry Potter for the next 30 seconds, so skip ahead if you don't want any spoilers. Harry Potter was a brilliant franchise with expert direction and an interesting story. Experiencing that story organically was very entertaining, but if instead of watching the films, I came up to you and said, Harry's parents died, then it turned out he was a Horcrux, then he died, then he decided he didn't want to, then he killed the villain and lived happily ever after. It just doesn't carry any emotional weight. Telling an audience a story happened will never, under any circumstances, beat the audience experiencing that story for themselves. An example of the many times Snyder told us but didn't tell us was with Batman. He told us Batman is old and has lost his moral code. We understand, just as much as someone who read the story understands, but understanding is not what the art of film is about. Film is about making the audience feel emotion, whatever form it may be. If you fail to make your film an emotional journey, you have failed as a director. The reason for why Batman is a broken character is not explained at all. We are just told that is the case. If I were directing the movie, I would have made that scene where Batman visits his parents' graves just a little bit longer. Batman walks up to the two coffins. The camera shows two nameplates on them, Thomas and Martha Wayne. He pulls out a bouquet of roses and places all but one in a pot between the two. Slowly, he turns to his right to see another coffin. The name is blocked by Bruce's body, and we can't see what it says. He places the last rose onto a pot nearby and then lays his hand lovingly on the top of the stone. Bruce walks away from the tomb and back into the light. The camera slowly pans from the entrance towards the lonely coffin to see two words engraved on the side. Dick Grayson. This would have been such a powerful, beautiful, and above all, emotional moment, because it would actually answer the question of why Batman is broken and would hint towards a larger story. This right here is how you do universe building, not by having one of your characters watch a couple of YouTube videos. Maybe Bruce was responsible for Dick's death, as he let a villain live, and then that villain went on to murder Robin. This broke Batman, as it didn't just fill his heart with guilt, but it also proved that his philosophy of never killing doesn't work on some criminals, as some criminals are better off dead. Or maybe not. That question would never be answered, and the audience would never know for sure. But great film is not about knowing, it's about feeling, about teaching the audience the complexities of the human condition. And when a film such as Batman vs Superman does not deliver genuine emotion, it fails as a film, as it has no soul. And I don't want to be a complete pessimist, so I will give this film one accolade. It's not the worst Batman movie out there, but then again, that's not saying much. Thanks for watching this week's video. I'm starting to like making these videos more and more, but growing on YouTube is a very long and hard road. If you enjoyed this video and learned a little along the way, please like and subscribe so other people can have the chance to enjoy it as well. Thanks for watching, and I will see you guys next time on The Closer Look.